Hi, Sam. Okay, cool.
That's perfect.
Hi, man.
Yeah, I'm all right.
I'm just gonna wait for others to join, then we can
Okay.
just start the class today. Yep. I don't want to just um leave them there because if I continue at this point in time, we've got no one joining already, and it's going to be too difficult to
It's,
pick up. But that doesn't matter if they don't join the next 5 minutes. We are just going to start.
I will chat. I will chat discussion.
Let's wait. Let's hold on. So I'm just gonna stop this for now. And see.
I can see how successful it is now. I was thinking about this is a number I did to take the then this that's one.
All right, that's fine. Things. Like that. And All right, everyone. Thank you so much for making it today also. I believe we can start now. So I'm just going to be putting my face for now and then take it off after a while also. Okay, so what are we going to be looking at today? Please, can you confirm you can hear me? For people that are joined on LinkedIn, the ones that joined on YouTube and also on Teams, can you please confirm that you can hear me clearly? Okay, so just hold on, please. I'm trying to test my mic on YouTube and LinkedIn. I want to be sure that that's working perfectly. Just give me a minute, please. Seems not to hear anything from LinkedIn. Okay, that's lovely. Just a minute, please, and we'll get on this. Just a minute. I just need to quickly confirm. Oh, really? My laptop playing another video. Really? Just give me a minute. What can you guys hear? Are you hearing something else? I'm just gonna take off my video for now. Let me just fix this. Okay, people on LinkedIn said they can hear me, which is fine. I think we can just go ahead. Since they can hear me, it's all fine now. Let's just go ahead and so should in case at any point in time you guys cannot hear me either on LinkedIn or on YouTube, please confirm, please let me know so that I can just look into that particular issue because for some times now I've noticed that some of those on LinkedIn are not able to hear me clearly, but I can see people have confirmed that they can hear me loud and clear. Thank you, Teju, for that confirmation. Okay, so we'll just go ahead with what we have today. And what are we going to be looking at today? We've started with the first module, which is the administrator identity, and we're able to talk about users, groups, and some other identity objects. So, what are we going to be looking at today? We are going to be looking at governance and compliance. This is still under identity, but in this case now, we are going to be heavy on policies, how to make sure that infrastructures that we are deploying within our environment are actually compliant. We do not just want to deploy infrastructures for the sake of deployment. We also want to make sure that they are compliant. How do we make this possible? So what are the learning objectives that we are going to be looking at today? Now we'll look at how to configure subscriptions within our environment. um, I've told you guys, when we started talking about the hierarchy in Azure, I told you about management group, Then under the management group, we have subscriptions. You all know that without a subscription, there is no way we can deploy any resource within our environment. So resources are very, very important. So we need those within our environment to be able to deploy. At least have one resource, one subscription. So we have different types of subscriptions. We have the pay as you go, we have the student credit, we have some other ones, maybe you just get it maybe based on your um need or something, or based on your status, like if you're a student, there is, I think you'll get $100 subscription that will roll, that will be kind of rolling every month. There are some other free subscription that you get, but we'll start talking about those. What are some of the limitations also? If you get free subscription, like the student subscription, there are some services that you might not be able to take advantage of. We have free subscription also. If you activate Azure for the first time, you can actually get a free subscription of $200, that will last you a month. So, and if that is done, you're done with the trial, and you just feel like, okay, Azure is cool for you, you want to go ahead, then you can actually, after that 1 month of trial, you can actually now get a pay as you go subscription. There are other subscriptions like the EA subscription, enterprise agreement subscription, basically for some large companies, large organizations. But we are not going to be talking about the types of subscriptions that we have now. I just have to chip that in. But what we are going to be looking at today is how to configure all these subscriptions. Now, from there, I just talk about the fact that we are going to be looking at compliance and governance. Now, where is the compliance coming in? What are we going to be leveraging on to make sure that our resources are compliant? So we are going to be looking at Azure policy, which is the main or the go-to technology within Azure environment when you're talking about compliance of your resources. So we look at Azure policies. Under these Azure policies, we're going to be looking at different terminologies like definitions, assignments, initiative definitions, initiative assignments, and the likes. Then from there, we now move on to role-based access control. For the role-based access control, oh, really? Just give me a minute, please. I would thank you guys. Just give me a minute. I'm just going to look at that. Why is my voice not? Just a minute. What about now? For people on LinkedIn, yeah, I know my voice is fine on Teams. Um, you know, I'm looking at those guys on LinkedIn and on YouTube. John, can you confirm now if it's better? If it's not, then I might need to just change my mic. Just, oh, very very low. What's going on? Um, okay. I'm just quickly going to look at that. Just give me some minute. Sometimes I don't even know. Still not clear. I'm trying to fix that. Let's see. I'm just going to change my mic, and you guys can actually confirm again if that actually resolved it. So I did change my mic now. Can you guys confirm if it's different now or still acting the same? Okay. If it's better now, then I know what the issue is. Can you guys confirm on uh, LinkedIn then? I can see there is a confirmation on YouTube saying it's better now. I just want to be sure that I've got the issue resolved. So I'm just gonna wait for people on LinkedIn to on YouTube. It should not there shouldn't be any problem though. Yeah. Okay. So I did change my mic. The kind of mic I'm using, I don't even need to be that close. It should be able to pick it up, but I've changed it to a different one. So um, if it's clear now, then we are good. I think we can just go ahead. Thanks, Bob. So we'll just continue looking at. So you guys have not actually missed a lot. I was just talking about subscriptions, Azure policies, role-based access control, which was what I was actually, looking at before you guys, told me the mic wasn't working fine. Now that is cool. So for the role-based now low, so I think it's not just the mic then. I think it's the software I'm using. I would have to look at this then. Seems not to be the mic. It's the software I'm using. Can you guys confirm now? It should be better now, but I'm not sure there will be. I'm just struggling to. Yeah, it will be fine on Teams. So I know what is happening. So on Teams it will be fine. So while trying to get this to YouTube and LinkedIn at the same time, I'm actually using OBS. I feel like that's where the issue is. I need to find another software to actually push those, to LinkedIn and YouTube. Just a moment. I'm just going to look at this again, and um, don't want to. This is going to be picking up unnecessarily. Just a minute. Just a minute, please. I'm just going to look at this. Um, yeah, if it's okay now, I think it's just this thing, moving here and there. But I'm just going to confirm that. Just give me a minute, then we can just continue because this is not looking fine. If you're having voice issue, so so I'm actually using Restream uh, for to do this. So within the Restream, because I'm not using Restream, I'm not using the Restream to push those videos. However, I had to configure OBS with Restream, and that's why I just don't want to use Restream only, and because I have people on my LinkedIn environment also. Sorry, on Teams also. But just give me a minute. I'm just trying to confirm something, and from there we can actually go ahead. Okay. Okay, so we'll just continue. I believe it should be fine now, but at any point in time, if it gets low again, just let me know. Okay, so I started talking about subscriptions, Azure policies, role-based access control, which is what we are going to, as a cloud engineer, you are going to need this a lot. You're going to have to know a lot about the role-based access control. You need to know a lot about all those roles that we have within the environment. Aside the fact that you can actually leverage on the built-in roles to assign those permissions to identities within your environment to be able to perform maybe an operation, some operations, or whatever you need the identity to do. We actually do everything by leveraging on that role-based access control. Now, at some point, you are not going to just be using this role-based access control. You are going to be using it with privileged identity management to assign just-in-time role. But we'll get there. But at this point in time, we are going to be looking at how to configure role-based access control. We are going to look at how to leverage on the built-in roles. We are also going to look at how to um, customize or create a custom role based on whatever the identity needs to access. From there, we'll now wrap it up with the lab 2A and 2B. But I'm not going to be doing this because while we are actually talking about this configure subscription, Azure policy, role-based access control, I would be demonstrating, how you can actually do this within the environment. So it won't be just me, going back to the lab and start, doing these one after the other, but it's something we can actually do also. So let's start by looking at all these objectives listed here. So the first thing is how to configure subscription and configure Azure resources, Azure resource manager resource. So we look at, so what are the stuff we are going to be looking at here under this particular learning objective? We are going to be looking at how to identify regions. We talked about regions. We talked about region pair. Regions are locations where your resources are being deployed. However, for redundancy purposes, you want to have a region pair. You want to have your resource in one region, then put like have the resource also duplicated or cloned or deployed within another region in case of failover. Then we look at how to configure or implement Azure resources. We look at how to identify usage within your subscription. How do you obtain a subscription? Like I said, it all depends on the kind of subscription you're leveraging on. It might be a free subscription, it might be student subscription if you're a student, it might even be a pay-as-you-go subscription, or even an enterprise agreement subscription, which we call the EA subscription. Then once we are able to do that, then we look at how to create resource groups. Now, I've talked about the fact that there are hierarchy to these things. You know, there is no way you can actually create a resource within the environment without having a subscription. And there is no way you are going to be able to create, a resource without having to create a resource group within that subscription that you have. So there is an hierarchy to this. Like I said, we have the management group, then we have all your subscriptions are actually attached to at least one management group. Then under the management group, you have the subscriptions. Then under the subscription, depending on how many subscriptions you have, then under the subscription, you have resource group. And within the resource group is where you now create your resources. So you need one subscription within your tenant to be able to create resource. So from there, we look at how to determine service limit and quota. Service limit, we're going to be talking about you have virtual machine that you have deployed within the East UK region. And here we're like, okay, we are only allowed to deploy 10 virtual machines of this type, of this size within that particular region. So that's the quota. You know, if that's if we deploy 10 virtual machines, we've reached the quota. So you need to find a way to increase it. Is either you do this by yourself if you're allowed within the portal, or you raise a ticket to Microsoft, and that quota will be increased. Then once we are done with that, we look at the resource hierarchy, which I talked about. Then we look at how to apply resource tagging. We are going to be talking about tagging for people that joined my fundamental class. We talked about tags, which are very important when you are creating your resource. Tags can actually be useful when it comes to cost management, when it comes to logically segregating your resources. It might be based on cost, it might be based on environment. You want to have a tag to say this particular resource is a resource just for the production environment. You want to be able to say this particular resource is used by people within this department, so that when it comes to the cost management, who to assign that particular cost to. And like I said, it is not just for costing, though it's very useful when it comes to cost management, but it's not just for costing. It might be based on environment, it might be based on support. You want to have a tag to say this is the person you reach out to if you ever need anyone, to assist with this particular resource. Let's say you have a virtual machine created, and that virtual machine has been created for years, no one is using it, and you being the cloud engineer, you are like, we can save money here. Let's take out this virtual machine. No one is actually using it. It's just there. It has not been enabled for years. You cannot just go there without getting approval of whoever owns that machine. Except if you are sure that it's just dormant. Then we can have like a tag to say this particular machine belongs to this person, this particular machine belongs to this department. You can even have a tag. We'll look at when we start going the advanced level. We look at how we can actually set up a tag. Like we can create an Azure policy that will go ahead to delete some resources, or let's say decommission some resources. But we can actually now integrate tagging with that particular policy. So when you have a tag like decommission, do you understand? Then the policy will check that, and any resource where the commission is actually on, as a tag, it will just decommission it. So it all depends on what we're actually using this for. But like I said, a lot of things. Then after then, we are going to look at how to manage costs within the environment. Then we'll go ahead to do our learning recap. So let's start by looking at regions. I'm not going to be talking about this deeply. We've talked about this. This is actually a fundamental, let's say objective. But let's look at how many regions that we have currently within 140 countries. We've got like 60 plus regions. Now for these regions, um, for these regions, uh, it all depends on where you are. For compliance purpose also, you do not just want to deploy resources outside your own region, maybe just because of cost saving. When we talk about the fact that what are some of the things that affect costing, the location where you have your resource deployed also have a great effect on the cost of that resource you're deploying. It is not just the type of resource, the location also, you know, contributes to the costing. Now, if because resources are cheaper to deploy in, let's say, South Africa region, and we or our customers are actually in China North, it doesn't make any sense because that's far away. Why do you want to go deploy in South Africa region? Because maybe the cost there is minute compared to what you're going to be doing within the China region. And for compliance purpose, you need your resources to be within the region, where you are or where your customers are. So you can see here, I'm not going to be reading this through. A region represents a collection of data centers. We've discussed this during the fundamental class, but in case you want me to go back, you can ask that question. But I'm not sure this is actually for this particular class. But for us to have regions, these regions are just there for redundancy purposes, just to make sure that um, you know, if at any point in time we need to switch region. And funny enough is when you deploy your resource, you only know your primary region, except if you are specifically, mapped out your secondary region. So sometimes even when your resource goes down, your that resource will be switched to the other region, if at some point it goes down at the primary region and you will not even know, except from some resources like the database, which you might need to also add within your code or your storage account, so that at any point in time, if anything goes down, then your code can actually switch to the secondary region. But for redundancy purposes, for failover, and this is one of the promise of Microsoft for high availability, and that's why you have regions, being deployed. So you do not just want to leverage on the fact that, oh, at least we've got different data centers within this particular region. In case there is a downtime in one data center, I can still have my machine running well in other data center, or let's say you have a virtual machine deployed and you've selected, for the redundancy purposes, you've selected, or redundancy option, you selected availability set. We talked about availability set, where we talked about, fault domains and update domains for people that join, my fundamental class. So within that, we all know that no two update domains or fault domains are going to be restarted at the same time. So for that, even when your machine goes down, it's actually being replicated in another. So it's replicated in another, rack or within another server, then you are still good. But in case that data center goes down, that's why one of the reasons why you want to leverage on availability zones, or you want to leverage on region pair. So yes, TJ, like you said, yeah, you we've discussed this. A region contains, one or more availability zone. So I think I gave an illustration. I use Nigeria as an illustration, as an example. If let's say you have one zone, let's say the southwest zone, the north central, whatever you want to think, eastern zone, or so within the south or southwest zone, we've got Lagos, Abeokuta, or Lagos. If you have to use the state, Lagos, Ogun, or your and the likes. So within these particular southwest zones, we've got different data centers. We can have our data within, the or your data center. In case there is a downtime there, that will switch over to the Lagos one. But that's not the best. What if everything within the zone goes down? And that's why we want to leverage on, region peer sometimes, so that yes, we have our resources replicated within zones. However, we still want to replicate it within a different region. So that's what we have, for region. So we've got a lot of regions there. You can take a look at it. I'm so sure you guys have started looking at the Microsoft Learning environment, and that will give you more, um, or talk more about this. So if you read this and you don't understand, you can always let me know. Okay, so we've talked about that. Let's now look at the Azure subscription. Like I said, there is no way you can actually create any resource within the Azure environment if you have not got any subscription. So your subscription needs to be there, and is linked to Azure services. And this is what you are going to, even when we said, you know, you are charged based on pay as you go model, but you need, at least we need something to always track what you're actually using. So we need a subscription. And within this subscription, you can have different resource groups, then you can have different subscriptions, deploy within this particular subscription. So um, whatever is here is defined as logical unit of Azure services that is actually linked to an Azure account. So basically, it's used for billing purposes. It's used for deploying your resources. So we need a subscription to be able to deploy our services. Now, moving away, okay, so let's just look at what we have here. Now, I've told you guys that we can have different subscriptions within the environment. So you can see what has been done here. They've got one particular account, maybe for the organization, an account has been created. Then we've got dev subscription, we've got test subscription, we've got production subscription. Here, what they are trying to do is just to segregate or separate their resources based on subscription that has been deployed within the environment. So if you are deploying anything within the environment, which are basically for production purposes, you need to deploy within the production subscription. If you are doing anything, maybe testing, you know, you can do it within the test subscription. For any new product that is being built out, we can actually do that within the dev subscription. Let's say there is a new web application that we want to deploy, and the dev, is still within the dev phase, the development phase. So everything is going to be tested within the dev subscription. So we can have multiple subscriptions within your environment, and within that, this is where the hierarchy comes in. So we are going to be talking about the hierarchy, and you guys are going to see, why, we need to segregate or have permissions on a hierarchy, but we're going to talk about the hierarchy. So you have different subscription based on the diagram here. This is just trying to explain they have subscriptions um, based on the environment where the resources are being deployed to. So moving away, now I've talked about different type of subscriptions that you can actually, um, leverage on. I talked about, so if you try to pick up an Azure account now, you are going to, be leveraging on the free subscription. And that free subscription gives you $200 unit, or credit, and it will only last for 30 days. It will only last for 30 days. However, it's possible for you to pick up a subscription and within 10 days you are out of it. This you are out because if you deploy resources that will take all the 200 within that 10 days, even when Azure has said you can use it for 30 days, before moving on to pay as you go, you know you still have to make sure that whatever resource you are deploying within your environment, are cleaned up immediately after you are done testing whatever you're testing. However, your 200 can, elapse, or you might um this might expire within, the days, even before 30 days, if you deploy resources that are so powerful, and are costly. So it's either you finish it up. So whichever comes first, it's either you finish up the credit before 30 days, or the 30 days elapsed and your 200 subscription just get expired. That's for sure. So or you want to leverage on the pay as you go. The pay as you go is you're going to be charged monthly based on what you have actually used. So this is actually different from the full subscription. There's nothing expiring. However, if you're actually using pay as you go, I don't know what is going on. Um, however, um, I I'll try to change this. I don't know what's going on. If I keep getting, just give me a minute. These guys are still complaining of the poor audio. I don't know what's going on. Okay. Uh, let's see if this is going to be good. Okay. What about now? Okay, I'm just guys on Teams. Give me some minute. Let me just confirm something again. Um, just a little bit concerned about the voice on LinkedIn. You know, are we still there? Okay, I think I can hear myself. Are you sure? Because I'm testing with my phone also, and I can hear myself. Okay, just hold on.
I can hear you, sir, also.
Yeah, no. On Teams is fine. Okay, I think it's fine. I'll go ahead. So, but in case you guys, but I can hear because I'm testing with my phone also for guys that joined on LinkedIn. Testing with my phone. I can hear myself. Maybe not that, maybe not that clear, but at least I can. I will look at that after this class. I'm so sorry. I don't know what's going on, but I will look at that after this class. I need to just find a lasting solution to this thing. It's been okay. So we were talking about the pay as you go, which is going to charge you every month. Like I've said, it all depends on whatever actually you are using within the network. It depends. It depends on what we are using within the network. You know. Um, so from there we have the CSP, which is for the Microsoft Cloud solution. Now for this one, it's a different thing in the sense that we've got uh, cloud providers, or cloud partners. What you do, you don't want to manage that part of your environment. So you rather just go through the cloud providers, or what we call the CSP. And what they do is, they will be the one to manage everything related to accounting, cost management, subscription deployment within your environment. And if you're actually on CSP, when you raise a ticket, or let's say you have an issue within your environment, then you need to go through them, to get to Microsoft. A minute, please. I sincere apologies. Okay, so we're talking about the CSP. So for the CSP, these are organizations you can actually go to, and they are called Microsoft partners. So in this case, they will be the one to, they will be the one to um they will be the one to deploy everything within the environment. However, you have to go through them if there is a need for, you know uh, resolving issues within your environment also. So from there, let's go to enterprise. So for this enterprise, you have this agreement with Microsoft, and these are actually targeted at enterprise scale organization. The last one is the student subscription, which gives you, just like the free subscription, it gives you $100 for 12 months. So all you need to do is just to verify that you are a student. So this might be via your student email or something, but you need to just verify you are actually a student, to be able to leverage on this. Today I would look at that. I don't know. I don't know, but I will look at that. I believe this is the application I'm using to extend this to LinkedIn and YouTube. I will look at that. I promise to after this particular class. So this is just talking about how do we obtain this subscription, enterprise agreement, resellers, which is for the CSP. So for the CSP, like I said, they are the one selling, they are the one in charge of the accounting, they are the one in charge of the posting. So you are going to be paying to them, you are not paying directly to Microsoft. If you're actually leveraging on the CSP, then we have the personal free account, which is either the $200 you are taking, or the student account subscription that will be assigned to you if you verify yourself as a student. Now from there, if since you have been able to obtain a resource now, sorry, a subscription now, the next thing to do before you can start deploying your resources is for you to create a resource group. Now I've explained this resource group. Just like let's say you get an apartment, a rented apartment now, and nothing is there. You've just got the building, so before you can start staying there, you want to get some things to make life easy for yourself. You want to get chairs, maybe just to put in the living room. You want to get beddings, for your rooms. You want to get microwave and some of the things. You know where to arrange these for the chair, maybe the three sitters chair. You don't want to take that to your bedroom. Logically it's not. Um, then you want to have it in the living room. You have some stuff that you've gotten also in the room and the likes. Those are just like the way the resource group works. So you have it, but it doesn't mean that you cannot have TV in the living room, still have TV, in your room, or even still have TV in your kitchen. So meaning you can deploy the same resource, you know, in different resource groups, depending on what you want. But this resource group are just here to logically hold your resources. So sometimes your resource group might be based on environment also. You might have a resource group created. Let's say you have just one subscription and you want to segregate, you know, what goes in here, or you have just one subscription for the entire organization and you want to create a resource group based on the department. So you want to have a resource group named mathematics department. You want to have another one named finance department and the likes, depending on whatever you want to do. Or this might be based on services, AI services, whatever you want to name that resource group. But all you need to is you need a resource group to be created before you can start, creating your resources. So resource groups are just logical, I would say logical grouping of your resource. So we can have the same resource, exist in different resource group. And but however, like the first statement here says resources can only exist in one group. Meaning if I deploy a virtual machine now and I name that virtual machine SQ Babafemi, that virtual machine cannot be cloned into, or that same virtual machine The same way you cannot have your laptop if you have it in the room now, you cannot have that same laptop in the living room except you take it there. That's the way this actually works. Also, you can also move your resource from one resource group to another. So we'll start looking at that. However, once you have actually created a resource group, you cannot rename that resource group. If there is a need for you to change the name, you need to delete that resource group. And also, you cannot nest a resource group. That means you cannot create a resource group within a resource group. No. Once you have a resource group created, the only thing you can create within that resource group is your resource or your resources. So let's go from there. Now let's talk about service limits and quota. We talked about this already. I explained this already. This actually tracks your usage, and there is always chance for you to increase those limits. So you have those limits. So when you talk about service limits, quota, so these are, every resource have their own quota, or let's say have their own limits. Then within a particular subscription, so that subscription also has a quota. So depending on the kind of resource, or sorry, depending on the kind of subscription that you have actually obtained, if you obtain a free tier subscription, there will be a limit, to how many virtual machines you can deploy within that particular subscription. That's term that subscription is termed subscription quota. However, each resource that you deploy within that subscription also have their own limit, and that's termed the service limit. So if there is a need for you to now increase the limit, it's either you are able to do it on your own. You can go in there, but however, you need at least, I believe you need an owner role. I've not tested with a contributor role. And when we start talking about the rules, you see those permissions. You need to be, I, I believe, yeah, a contributor should be able to do that. I will look at that. Then, to increase that, so you need that necessary permission. Let me just put it that way for now, to be able to increase the limit of that subscription, or you need to just raise a support ticket to Microsoft to help you increase that service limit. Now, moving away from that, this is talking about our resource hierarchy. We've talked about these, severally, where I said there is no way you can deploy a subscription or a resource within your environment if you do not have a subscription. You cannot create a resource within the subscription directly. At least you need a resource group, and within the resource group, you need that is where you have your resources created. So also your subscription is assigned to at least one management group. And when I said at least one management group, when you create a new tenant, when you create a new organization in Azure, you know, you have Sam, you were not really looking at it. So so as I actually explained, for each resource you're actually looking at, they've got their own limit. Now, each resource, let me just go back to that. Each resource has got their own limit. Virtual machine have got their own limit. There is this virtual machine size. We have different sizes of virtual machines that you can actually create. Now, that's the limit of that resource, and that's what we refer to as the service limit. However, that's all those depending on the resources. You start creating the resources. There's a limit to the number of resource also you can create, on a particular subscription, and that's what we call the subscription quota. Once that quota for that subscription, regardless of the number of resources you've created. So it depends on, just keep creating different resources. But when it gets to the quota of that subscription, you'll not be able to do that again. So I would say there is a quota, for that subscription, and there is a limit of a particular resource that you can create. So if I'm creating virtual machine, let's say I have a limit of 5,000. I'll keep creating it. I will keep creating it. And when it gets to, so it might be of different region, it might be of different sizes. Each size might have a limit, you know, each size of that virtual machine might have a limit. So you are creating that, and those are the service limit. But when you finally get to that 5,000, now I'm creating different virtual machines in different regions, in different sizes. For each of these guys, they have their limit. So those ones we refer to as the service limit. But at some point, you are going to get to that virtual machine limit, regardless of the size now, regardless of the region where those are actually being created. And that's what we refer to as subscription quota. So Sam just asked a question saying, can you clarify the difference between service limit and subscription quota? And that's what I was trying to do. Okay, so moving away from that, um, we're talking about the resource hierarchy within the Azure environment. And from what you can see here, we have the root management group. You can see there are some other management group that have been created. There are some other subscription, but I'm not going to explain it this way. At least, like I said, you need at least one resource management group, within the environment. So when you create your organization, a root management group will be created for you. And the good thing is your root management group is going to have the same object ID as your tenant ID. So when you start creating subscriptions, your subscription by default is going to be assigned to or attached to the root management group. Then from there, if you decide to now create multiple management group, maybe just to segregate, those subscriptions. So I can have different management group, maybe based on environment. I want to have production management group. I want to have dev management group. And within this, or within each of the management group, then I can have my subscriptions. Now, one of the reasons why you have to do that is, let's say I want to apply a policy, and this policy, I only want that policy to be, to affect only production resources. So what I will just do, because I've got so many subscriptions within my production environment, and I don't want to start assigning, let's say I have 86 subscriptions within the environment. I don't want to start assigning it on each of the subscription. Then what I would rather do is just create a production management group, add all those resources, add all those subscriptions under that management group, then assign that particular policy. With that now, it will cascade down to all those subscriptions, all those resource groups, all those resources within that production management group. The same thing, you can have it based on costing. You want to have, okay, let's have these. Maybe we'll create a policy that will tag all those resources that have been deployed within this particular management group. It might be because of resource lock. So I think we talked about resource lock in fundamental, where you want to prevent accidental deletion or accidental modification of your resources. So instead of assigning these on maybe on a resource group or on a subscription, you rather assign it on a management group, and it will cascade down to everything, all resources within that particular management group. Another good thing here is, if you want to assign a role, to someone. Let's say you have the lead cloud engineer or the manager. You would rather assign a role to that person on the root management group. And with that now, that's if I assign a role to someone here, that role will cascade down to the subscriptions there, because once you assign the role, it will cascade down to all these. But if I assign a role to someone on marketing management group, that person will only be able to manage, these subscriptions there, because that role will not, it won't cascade down to anywhere because it wasn't assigned on the group management group. The same way, if I assign a role on this particular management group, it will cascade down to everything there, but not on these other ones. But anyone assign a role here, or any policy you apply here, or any resource lock that you apply here will cascade down to every subscription and resource groups. Yeah, but when I take you guys to the environment, you will see this more. So resource tagging, I've talked about these. These are this consists of name value pair. Now resource tagging, I think at this point, let me just bring this here instead of we. Yep. So let's say we want to create, well, let me just take you to some of those virtual machines I've created within this particular tenant, and I'm going to take one here, and you can see how the tag works. So for the tags, like I said, name value pair, you want to have tags. It might be based on subscription costing. It might be based on maybe department, depending on whatever tag you want to have. Now I've only added one tag here, and that tag is an environment tag. I'm saying anytime you see this particular resource, you know this resource is actually a production resource. So I can create, cost management, dashboard based on this. I can create policies based on this. I can have a different tag. Uh, let's say I have a tag that says um, contact, meaning, who do you need to contact once there is an issue with this. Then I can have my email in here, and once you see these, um you know that this is the person you need to contact, when if there is an issue with this particular resource. So you know tags are very, very important. It is not just for cost management. It's so effective when you use it there, but it's not just for cost management. So a lot of things you can use it for policies also. Like I said, you can see a typical example of how you use your tagging in Azure is saying owner is Joe. So if there is a need for me to deploy or delete, or we're looking at why is this virtual machine, why has it not been patched all this while, then we can look at it and say who is the owner of that particular machine, and we say, oh, it's Joe. So I can quickly just chat Joe and say, Joe, that machine is vulnerable. Can you patch that particular machine? Or we want to have different departments, we want to have costing based on each department that we have in Azure. And I can just go there and say, oh, this is for marketing department, and this is how much they're going to be paying, because we can have a dashboard that brings up everything owned by each department. So we can have all the costs, associated with the marketing department just by leveraging on the tagging. The last one here is the environment, which I explained that, let's say you want to have those resources separated or segregated based on the environment. Now, this particular, app service that you can see here is actually, for production purpose, so, and that's why now here, like I was explaining the other time, let's say you want to leverage on cost management dashboard and you are just using the departments. So for the cost center, you want to have marketing. So anywhere the dashboard sees marketing, it's just going to pick it and add it to that particular dashboard. So at the end of the day, you get all the costs where marketing department has been tagged as the department. So that's it. Very good when it comes to resource tagging. You can actually, instead of doing this manually, you can have Azure policy deployed, and that's going to be doing the tagging for you. Um, so this talks about how do you manage cost. You can see we have cost to be resource specific. We talked about the fact that every time you want to create a resource, it's going to tell you this is how much it's going to cost you at the end of the day. And one of the things that affects cost a lot is the location where you deploy your resource. And that's what is being, discussed there, or, or being highlighted here. So you can see usage cost may vary between locations. So you can deploy this particular virtual machine size in maybe South Africa, West or East, or whatever region, and you want to do the same in China North, and you can actually see that there is cost difference, maybe £10 or $10, per month. So you can see, it all depends. Now, cost for inbound and outbound data transfer differs. In Azure, basically, I will just tell you inbound transfer or inbound data are free most of the time. But outbound, so when we talk about the inbound, outbound, let's say you are backing up your machine, your on-premises machine to the cloud. You want to leverage on the backup service in the Azure cloud environment. So for you to transfer all your data to Azure, it won't cost you anything. But when you want to take those data out, you are going to be paying, for that particular outbound data transfer, and that's what is being discussed here. So you can actually see you have a lot of things. Your billing account might be based on each department. You can have what we call the enrollment account if you are leveraging on EA, like enterprise subscription. Within that particular enterprise subscription, you can have different subscriptions, different resource groups, and the like that. You can do your cost management based on resource group, based on subscription, or you want to have like a department, and within that department you've got different enrollment number. You want to do that based on enrollment number. So like I said, we are going to be looking at different permissions, different, what we are going to be looking at different permissions within there. So we have the billing, so we have the billing, entities, we have resource entities. So for you to be able to also take out, all these things, you need to have the right permission also. So, but we'll talk about those permissions later. So let me recap. Okay, so let me just take you just to see what we've been talking about since. Now, we started with, management group. I'm going to go to my management group, and you're going to see. So like I said, your subscriptions are actually assigned to your management group. Immediately you create a new subscription. The new subscription, let's say you have a new subscription you've created, and that subscription is basically for production purposes. Your subscription are going to be assigned or attached to your root subscription initially. Then from there, you can now move those subscription to whichever management group you want to move them to. Let's wait as this is still loading. Okay, so you can see here, even when I've created different management group here, you can see the two subscriptions that I've got within this tenant has been attached or assigned, by default to my tenant root, management group. If I decide to create, let's say, here I can create a new subscription. If I create a new subscription here, it's still going to be attached to this root management group. I can also create a new management group. Let's say I'm creating a new management group. It's going to tell me, I'm just going to create a random one. It's going to ask me for management group ID. Um, just say, I'm just going to change this. But if you create this programmatically, you wouldn't have to worry about this. But I'm going to change this. I now say prod, or let's say production. So I can create a new management group, but for you to be able to create that, you need to have the necessary permission. The permission here is based on, we have two different permissions. There is one which is technically for Entra ID, or managing Entra ID objects. And that's where we're going to be talking about um, global administrator, where we're going to be talking about global reader, authenticator administrator, and the likes. All those ones are actually used for managing Entra ID objects. Then we'll start talking about roles, permissions needed to manage resources. Yeah, we are going to be talking about, or we call them subscription roles, or role-based access control, outback roles, where we are going to be talking about, owner role. We're going to be talking about contributor. We are going to be talking about storage accounts, contributor, and the likes. So here you can see I've created a new management group. Under this particular management group, you can see there are no subscriptions. All my subscriptions are still within this tenant management group. I can decide to say this particular subscription is for production purpose. Then all I can do here is just to click on this move, and it's going to ask me, where do you want to move this particular um subscription to. Then I just move that to the production subscription. However, I'm not going to do that based on some of the things I've done here, because it's going to, if I have any policies I've done there, it's going to affect it. So, and you can see, moving a management group or subscription to under management could change the access that you have there and the policies that are applied. So you want to be careful when you're actually doing that. So, but I'm just showing you how you can actually create, those management group, how you can create your subscription also. And within that subscription, you can now attach them to, you know, um, a new one. So the same thing if you want to move this. So you can move this to a different resource group and the likes, a different management group. And so that's it. Aside that, now that we have a subscription already, so let's go within that subscription. Within that subscription is where you now create, your resource group. Before you can actually deploy any resource here, you can actually see, we are going to be creating resource group. You can see the cost management board, the default one that has been created by Azure, and that's why you can see the current cost based on what I've actually used this month. And based on that, they are forecasting this is how much you are going to be using if you continue with this trend. If I continue using those resources the way I'm using them now, I'm going to end up spending £882 at the end of this month. And you can see what are those resources taking that money, what are those resources contributing, to the costing. So firewalls, I can say, oh, I don't need this firewall again. I can just go there and delete them. So you can have cost by resource. It depends on how you want to customize your dashboard. So you can see, you can have it based on resource group, you can have it based on resources, you can have it based on the type of resource you're deploying. So I can actually see that these are things, this is the major thing that is taking the money, is taking the chunk of the money. So I can look at orders and say, what are orders? I just go in there and see what are the other resources that has contributed to, these £130 that I spent this year. This is going to give me more precise. So you can see I've got firewalls. This is now based on the service that I've deployed now, you know. So for each of the service, I've got Azure firewalls that take £65 out of the 130. Then virtual machines, I've deployed Azure Bastion just to access my virtual machines within the environment without the need of having public IP address. I've got storage account in there. I've got container instances. Some of the virtual networks that I've deployed, backups that I've done on my virtual machines, Azure DNS that I've deployed, and the like. And you can also see the cost based on the regions, so where have I deployed each of these things? You can see I've deployed my firewall within this EU West, um and that's why it's showing this is East region, uh which is East US region. So you can see that's what's taking the chunk of my money, and you can see the one I've done within the the north part of this region. You can see the UK West, UK South, US East, and the likes. Now, the last one here is based on the resource group. So I've created a firewall, resource group, and that's where I've deployed my firewall, and that's what has taken this particular region. If there is no need for me to have this running again, which there is no need, I'll just go in there and deploy or and delete or decommission this particular resource group, and it will delete all those resources um that have been within that particular resource group. Same thing goes with these royalties. This is something for learning and the like. We've looked at that. Within the subscription, we talk about the quota, and let me show you the quota. When you go to the settings, each of these resources that you are deploying, like the question Sam asked the other time, each of these resources you are deploying, they are referred to as service. So we've got the virtual machines, and I'm so sure you can see that when I was showing you, the cost management, dashboard in Azure, where it was, this has actually been explained based on the service name, So each service, Azure Firewall is a service here, virtual machine is a service, that's the quota. What's the quota of that virtual machine? Then what's the quota of the entire subscription? How many resource can that subscription take? So I go back here and look at the quota. You can see my usage. It's going to start with, you know, some of those resources or where I'm actually deploying or some of those services I'm leveraging on to those ones I don't even use at all. So that's what I'm saying. So you can see within these, I've got like a quota, like a service. Um, I'm just going to look for the virtual machine itself. Now, uh, each of these virtual machines that I have here, now these are different sizes. DCS V3 is a size of virtual machine that I can actually deploy. I'm deploying this within South Central US, and the current usage is 6% because currently I've got 65 as my limit. If I deploy 65 of these, after then, this says, is this adjustable? Yes, it is, because that's still under the 25,000 that I can actually deploy within that region, or that virtual machine, you can see. But once everything gets to, that 25,000, it has gotten to the subscription limit. Now, can that be adjustable? No. I cannot do that on my own. If there is a need for me to do that, I need to now create a support request to Microsoft to help me with this. And if it gets to a quota also, and they say, oh, you cannot increase again, you need to, maybe move to a different subscription, or you need to just add a new subscription within your environment before you can actually leverage on that particular service also, so it all depends. So that's the difference between the service limit and the quota. So you can see we've got so many things there. These are for the compute. I can change these based on what I'm using. I believe I've got some storage accounts in there. So you can see storage account I've deployed within the UK South is 250. You can see the number of storage accounts I can deploy within each of these regions. When it gets to that, I can now look at how to request adjustment, and this is how we request those adjustments. All I need to do is just to click on that button. Just hold on, let this load. It's just going to tell you, some of the steps you need to follow, to increase that particular quota, or that particular limit. I don't know. My Azure has been acting up for a while now. Okay, now you can see now this is 250. I can decide to say, okay, I want to have 300 as my new quota. I'm just going to submit. It just goes, oh, this needs additional thing. You need to be able to authenticate before. I don't want to authenticate now, and I'm just going to cancel it. So, but that's how to increase that. So we talked about the subscription already. How do we now create our resources? I just showed you portal. Where are the resources? Before you can create a resource, like I said, you need a resource group, and these are the resource groups. You can start creating a resource group here. I've got so many resource group I've created here. You can go ahead, and you do not need so many things, or to add when you're creating a resource group. All you need to is just to put in the resource group name, what region do you want to deploy that resource, and that resource group. It doesn't matter if we have these within UK South. It doesn't mean that resources within this particular region cannot be from sorry, this particular resource group cannot be from different regions. So this doesn't have any effect on anything. And once you have the name, and I just say test, don't even know what I typed, but then you can have those tagged in and say this is for dev, this is for production, who is the owner of this particular resource, who is the contact for this particular resource group. And once you're done with that, you go ahead and create your resource group. And once you have your resource group, then you can start creating resources within that resource group. So if I click here, you can see all the resources that I've got within this particular subscription. And you can see all of them have got a resource group attached to them. All of them has got location attached to them. And within that particular subscription, since I'm within this subscription, you're just going to see all the same subscription listed here, but the resource groups are going to be different because for each of these resources that I've created, they're being created within or in different resource groups. And just to clarify these type, depending on the type of resource group of service I've created, let's say virtual machine, I've created 5, and this was what I was trying to explain the other time. You can see I've got different resource group, and I've created same service. So you can have same service deployed in different resource group, but I can only have this Ubuntu Learn, you know, within my learning resource group. I cannot have this same machine except if I'm just going to deploy another one in this particular region. I can deploy another one, maybe give it another name, but you cannot have this same machine in two different resource group, but you can have the same service in different resource groups. So that should not be so confusing. So yeah, I can also go here to the search and look for resource groups and start creating resource groups. So it doesn't have to be within that particular subscription. I'm just that's that. Now let's move ahead to any question before we move ahead. Let me put it that way. Okay, so let's move ahead to Azure policies. So I talked about the fact that, so before I start even going to, let me make this a little faster. I won't go through those slides. I will come back to them, but I'm just going to skip through. So I'd rather just go to policy here. We all know that Azure policies are just for compliant purposes. not just for compliance purposes. Like I've explained the other time that you can also use this to automatically tag your resources instead of maybe when you want to deploy, you start tagging them one after the other. No, it might be based on environment, or like I can create a policy that will tag all my resource, automatically. But majorly, this is for compliance purposes. And you can see the dashboard. Immediately I opened my Azure policy, you can see what is going on. This guy is telling me, oh, you've got so many resources in here, 36 from what we can see, and only one resource is compliant. That's bad. That's bad. You've got 35 that are not compliant. Then if I'm to do this, I need to start looking at, each of those resources and see why they are not compliant. How do we know what we are going to be looking at to be sure that our resources are going to be compliant? So to get started, you need to understand what we call the definition and what we call the assignment and the exceptions. So here we are going to be defining I'm not going to be defining, but I'm going to tell you, what you have within the definition. The definition is where you declare, or when you put in whatever you're looking for, or let's say the condition that needs to be met, before you can say this particular resource is compliant or not. So this is where you have, everything defined in. So I'm going to pick one of, so you can have the inbuilt policy, so we'll say definition, and we can have the custom or customized ones. So these are all inbuilt. I'm not sure I have any custom ones. So I'm just going to look at, let's see, virtual machines. Do we have anything related to virtual machines? Yeah, we've got so many though. Uh, what am I typing? Uh, let's hold on. So I'm going to look for something that is okay, or let's start from here. Okay, so this one says allow virtual machine size SKU, or I want to see some. Okay, let's just pick one of them. It doesn't really matter. So definition is where I am now. So like I said, this is where you put in, all the conditions that needs to be met, before you say this machine is compliant or not compliant. Now, once you are done with this particular one, the definition, then we'll move on to the assignment. I don't know what's going on with my Azure environment, but this has been going on for a while. Keep bouncing. Are you looking for MFA? I hope not. Let's just hold on this. Okay, so you can see the definition here, and these are everything. You've got the parameters. Yeah, let's start from here. You can see the name of that particular definition, what version, the description, what the policy is going to be doing. This particular policy says it lets you specify a set of virtual machine SKU that your organization can deploy. So what I'm saying is there's this size, because of the fact that people are just going there to deploy any virtual machine size, even when they don't need it, it's affecting the cost of the virtual machines that we are deploying within our environment. The best way, or a way we've actually seen to cut cost, is to limit, you know, staff within the organization to only deploy from this listed SKU. So we can have this. So this talks about, what's the property. The property is where, you have, you know, something describing the policy itself. So you have the display name, the policy name, the mode, we're still going to come back to these. And the next thing is for you to now declare the list of the SKUs. Here we do not have any. So you can have the type of SKU. If you want to specify the exact size of SKU or virtual machine that can be deployed, so you can have it here. Now, this is now the policy rule, because like I said, the definition is where you describe the rule. Now you're saying if all of, so that means all these fields needs to be correct. Now, what's the type of the service you are looking at? The type equals to what? Virtual machine. And we all know that virtual machine is a compute service. So, and that's what is being described here. We have virtual machine, a compute. Let's say we are looking at VMSS also. That's where we'll come here. App service also. That's where we'll come and look at this. So this is the service Microsoft.compute slash virtual machines, because virtual machine is what we're looking at, but not this particular field. Not this particular field, maybe some SKU username and the likes. Then what would be the effect? What would be the effect? What will happen? Should we deny or do we approve? So this is, since we are saying we've listed only allowed, only allowed size. Any other thing you see, please just deny it if it's not exactly what we have actually defined within our policy here. So if I said you can only deploy DCS 3 version 3 or DCS 2 version 3, and you try to deploy something else, when you're trying to deploy, it's just going to deny. So aside this deny, we've got different effects that can happen. We have allow, deny, or I think the other one is one other one, but that one is just for reporting purposes. You just want to understand your policy before you go ahead to change to change the effect. So that's what we have here, and this is the ID, where the definition is stored, and this is just the type of definition. And once you are done with describing, what your policy does, what's the rule, what's is going to be looking at, to be sure that the resource is compliant or not, then you can now assign that particular definition. And when we say assignment, we want to now attach this definition to a scope. Is it on the management group? Are we looking at all the resources within that particular management group? Is it going to be on, assigned to a subscription? Are we going to be doing these, on a particular subscription or all the subscriptions? Is it on a resource group? So once I click on that assign policy, now this is where I now select the scope where I want to assign that particular scope. If I do this on the root management group, that means it will affect all the subscriptions, all the virtual machines that people are planning to deploy within my environment, regardless of the subscription within there. I can push this to a particular subscription. So I can choose a particular subscription, and I can even literally choose a particular resource group and say this is where this resource group, only this resource group, if you try to deploy this kind of SKU within this particular resource group, just deny it. And so that's the scope. So the scope is where you're actually assigning that particular policy definitions to. Now, I can decide to now exclude. I've said anything within my environment, just deny. However, I want to exclude this particular subscription because anything deployed there, or let's say a particular resource group, anything deployed is within this particular resource group, because it's for DevOps.ng, we need them to be able to deploy any type of virtual machine, then I'll just exclude this. But I'm not a fan of this one because don't this one is just like you trying to create a static exclusion. Now there is other ways for you to exclude, or to create your exclusion, exclusions, within policies. But we are not going to be doing it here. It doesn't make sense. It's just this kind of rigid. So you are excluding this. I'd rather use a tag, to exclude those um resources. So we can have tags. When we start looking at tags, there are a lot of things we can actually use with tags. So when you see this particular tag and say, oh, this particular value that has been assigned to this particular tag means that it needs to be excluded from this particular policy, then that's it. Then policy definition, that's the name. We've got the version already. And what's going to be the policy enforcement? Do we want to disable it for now? Do we want to enable it? What are some of the parameters? So these are all the type of SKUs, that we have. Then remediation purpose, if there's a need. What would be the compliant message when you want to deploy that kind of compliant? I can say stop. You have been caught, or something not this, and say this VM size cannot be deployed based on compliance. You can have something, you can decide to leave it also. If you decide to leave it, there will be just some random, message saying, this is what you cannot do this, you cannot do this, you cannot do this based on what you have within that particular you're just going to get a message there saying this is not compliant, you cannot deploy. And one thing is, it's not going to affect the ones that have been deployed before, but they are going to start showing as not compliant within the environment. And that's what is happening here. So if I go back to the policy, you can decide to search for the policy. I need to go to this blade that says compliance, and that blade is where I now check those assignments. What are the resources that are not compliant? What are the resources that are compliant? How do I remediate these? Let's just go there. We've done the assignment, but I'll just go back here. So this one says, which is good, 1 out of 8 is compliant. Let's go and check what is this? Why are the others not compliant? Why is that one compliant? What's the definition? The first thing we need to check is the policy definition. What has actually been, what's the rule within the definition, and why is this thing not compliant? So if I click on this, I'm trying to see why this guy is not compliant. So we've got this not compliance. So this goes compliance, compliance, and I just click on this particular guy. Just hold on. I'm just trying to see the compliance state. Virtual machine and management pool. Okay, the effect I was looking for the other time is just audit. You can see all these things are audit. I will tell you why we have so many stuff at once. And so, like I said, the first thing you want to go and check is, why is this guy not compliant? Why is this not compliant? And you want to check the rule. So this rule says, if this field is virtual machine, or even a classic virtual machine, then what would be the effect? There should be an assessment, assistant condition, status code. If this is not LD or non-applicable, then it needs to flag it. So you need to understand what effect, what is there, and why this is being flagged. let's see, there's something I was looking for. It would tell you, just hold on, please. Um, so this shows not compliant. I don't want to go there. I just want to see the compliance message. Just give me a minute, please. If I create a definition, it will be easy. So just to remind you guys, these are definition. I will tell you where we have so many ones, in one particular definition. I'll tell you guys why. So hold on. No assignment has been found. I'll go back there. Okay, so let me just tell you the reason why we have so many definitions within that particular policy. Is, I talked about the fact that when you create just one definition, you are looking at what are the rules that needs to, or what are conditions that needs to be met before we can say that policy or that resource is compliant or not compliant. However, there are sometimes you feel like, okay, this virtual machine must not have public IP address. That same virtual machine, do I need to go and create another definition to say virtual machines should not have um, premium SSD? I cannot, instead of me creating these things differently, I can create what we call the initiative definition. The initiative definition encapsulates different definitions. So you can have multiple definition in just one policy, and that's what we refer to as initiative definition. So you can see most of these things you can see here, they are initiative. They are not just definitions. So they're not just policy. You can see these ones that are policies. These ones are one. It's just one thing. But once you have an initiative definition, you are having multiple definition in one. In one. Another thing I would like to explain here, you have three different types of policy. We can have the built-in, we can have the static, and we can have the custom. Currently, I do not have custom. I only have built-in and static. This static is the one that has been created and assigned on Microsoft level. So there is nothing you can do. It has been assigned. This kind of one is actually related to all the tenants, or or assigned to all the tenants you create on Microsoft Cloud. But this built-in, you can decide if you want to use it or not. But this one is compulsory, so it's something Microsoft actually uh, do from their own side. Then you can have a custom type definition, which will be the one you now assign or use within your environment. Let's see if I can have. I'm not sure I have all these ones because I've not got so many things created there. Let's see this one. Let's see if we have the compliance result on this particular one. If not, we'll just continue. We are far. Just hold on, please. This guy is loading. I don't know what's going on. Okay. I'm having. Okay, so let me just take you back here since this guy is still loading. Okay, I will just quickly local authentication. Okay, so the same thing goes here. If you want to assign this policy, you can also duplicate this policy. Let's say you have a policy you want to create. You want to make it a custom policy, but you want to change some things there. Instead of instead of using the one Microsoft has created, yes, it's custom, but you just feel like it's inbuilt, but you just feel like there's a need for me to still add some things within that particular policy definition. Then you can go there and add some other things. Then it's going to be custom policy at that particular time. So yeah, you can decide where is this definition going to be stored. Is it going to be within the root? I always advise you have it within the tenant root group, but the assignment is what you can have on different scope, depending on what you want. You can also import these. There are sample policies within the GitHub environment, where you can go in there and just import any type of policies that you want. You can see them here within, the sample folder. And how do you get here? All you need to do is just to click on import sample policy from GitHub. And this is, the environment where Microsoft has got all their, sample policies. So it all depends on what you want to enforce. You want to enforce NSG on any NIC that you create. You want to enforce NSG on subnet. So you do not want to have any user create any subnet within the environment and not add, you know, um, and not add NSG to it. So you want to have that particular policy imported from Azure. So it depends on whatever policy you want to import. You can actually do that from here. And what does this say? This says policy rule if any of these, any all of, it says with the virtual network, and the field not equals to maybe subscription dot security group, all of, not this field NSG. So if you do not have NSG assigned on this particular subnet, then what should be the effect? The effect is to deny that particular deployment, and that is what this policy says. So it all depends on what you want to do. So let's go back to our slide and just quickly look to. You can see this tells you how do we implement Azure policy, how do we create a new policy, demonstrate how to create new policy definition, the scope and initiative definition. Like I said, the same way you have initiative definition, which are um, two or more policies, being assigned, or policy definition being integrated together to become one policy. Now that's the same thing. You can have initiative assignment also. So then determine compliance. What will be the compliance? What are you looking at? What's the rule? Why is it not compliant? How many resources are compliant within this particular policy? And how do you make sure all that are also compliant? You know, so this, I'm not going to be looking at this. I'm not going to be, reading this through, but this just tells you what are some of the use cases. Like I said, yeah, because virtual machine deployment within each region, might be costly than the South Africa region, and some users just go in and put in, virtual machine within the South Africa region. Then you want to restrict that particular, location. So only this particular location can be used to deploy our resources. So you can do that. You want to require tags for every resource that you are creating. Nobody should be able to create a resource if you have not got, let's say, the environment tag. You know, everything. You want to make sure that every time a virtual machine is created, there is backup enabled. So that's a policy also. You can enforce it, and this is it. This talks about, I talked about policy initiative, which contains two or more policy definition, and that's what you can see here. And these are the scope. Scope means where do you assign it? So we use the scope under the assignment. Where do you want to assign? Do you want to assign this on the management group, on the subscription, or the resource group within the subscription itself? Then how do we now access the compliance? How do we see, all you need to, you just go to the compliant blade and see how many resources are actually compliant, how many are not compliant, and the like. And think this is it. You can look at it, and we've done most of this at least. Even if I did not create, at least I showed you the, and this is why I've done that. The last one, um, I'm not going to start defining this also. I'm just going to go, but this is important. Now, how do we? Let's talk about the differences or comparison. How do we compare Azure Outback rules to Entra ID rules? I've talked about the fact that Entra ID. I'm just going to take it back to the illustration I gave when we were still in the fundamental class. Let's say you rent an apartment that is not furnished, an unfurnished apartment. Now, that apartment doesn't belong to you, but the fact that you've rented it, the landlord still have the permission on it. You know, it's just like the global admin. You can come anytime and say, "I want to come and check my house," because it doesn't belong to you. That space doesn't belong to you. However, because it's an unfurnished apartment, you bought TVs, you bought chairs. Now, if the landlord comes into the house and say, "I want to come and check my house," and there is a let's say there is a dent on the wall, you know, you can actually say, boss, when are you going to repair this? Because we made this when we came, and they say, "Oh, okay, we'll repair it, or if you guys can repair it, then we can take it out from how much you're going to be paying, in the coming months, in the coming year." Yes, because that particular building belongs to him. But you will not be able to say the same when it comes to your sofa. I said, oh, you know, some of the guys that came in yesterday, they didn't know, and unintentionally they put, maybe paint on the sofa, or the TV was broken. What's the business of the landlord? He doesn't know anything because he doesn't own that. So I'm just telling you that you might be a global admin within the tenant, to be able to manage enter ID objects, and you still don't have permission on the subscription to create resources. So there is a difference there. Now, Azure Outback or subscription rules are used to manage resources within Azure. And when we talk about resources, we're talking about those services, that you can leverage on the virtual machines, app service, storage accounts, virtual machine skill set, container instance, Kubernetes instance, and the likes. But when we talk about the enter ID object, we are talking about users, groups, you know, yeah, applications, app registrations, and the likes, guest account that you've invited and the like. So I can have a role within the enter ID and not have a role on the Azure Outback. And that's why, if you have encountered this before, somebody invited you to the tenant, that person have got subscription within the tenant, and you are logging to that tenant, you cannot find any subscription because you have not been assigned any role on any of those subscriptions. You won't find anything. And let's say you have been assigned a role on the subscription also, and you go in there and say, "Oh, yes, I'm able to log in to that environment. However, I'm not able to create app registration. I'm not able to see the users in there because you don't have any permission on the enter ID side." And this is it. So, but there is always a backdoor for a global admin, on the enter ID side. So if you assign me a global admin within your subscription, within your tenant, I can still kick you out of your subscription and kick you out of your tenant. So global admin is a very powerful, a very powerful role to assign within enter ID tenants. So that's the difference. Access to subscription, access to resources, is for the outback. But for enter ID roles, we are looking at who can manage the enter ID object. Scope of enter ID is at tenant level, but outback scope is at multiple level. It can be within the management group, it can be within the subscription itself, it can be within the resource group itself, or it can even be on the resource group, on the resource itself, So that's for this type of roles. You have the inbuilt roles, we have the custom role also. So quickly look at these, I'm just going to use my environment to do this. Now, Enter ID, you can search for Microsoft Enter ID within your environment, or you can even go to this particular button here and click on Microsoft Enter ID. Whichever works for you, that's fine. Now, this Enter ID side is where I manage my Enter ID object. And for this side, like I said, I talked about some of the roles. We are going to look at some of the roles that you can actually, assign to users here, what you can actually manage within this particular ID. And I'm going to make these also so that we don't waste all that time. I'm going to take this to one of our, I'm going to use the management group in this case. Let's wait. So what I'm going to do is to have this thing. Oh, I've forgotten I've got so many screens. I'm trying to divide this thing into two. I've forgotten I've got so many screens. Yep, yep, that's fine. Now let me increase this you guys to see this. Yep, that should be better. Now these are users on the Enter ID side, groups, what devices or whatever, Enter ID objects. You can see them listed here. Users, group, application, devices, those are Enter ID objects. And any role assigned here are the ones you are going to be able to manage those objects. So if I go to roles and administrations, you are going to see all the roles you can actually assign to users within this tenant, within the tenant, yes, within the Enter ID side. The same way, I'm going to just click on one of these guys. Let me use the tenants roots group, to do this. Now you can see lots of roles depending on what the user will be doing. I'm going to click roles. AI administrator, application administrator, application developer. There are lots of them depending on what the user will be doing. Billing administrator, compliance administrator, conditional access administrator, directory reader, directory writer, and you can see this has actually explained everything, the person can actually do. Global reader, global admin, which is the highest privilege. I won't even say this is highly privileged or the most privileged role, you know, the same way the owner role is the most privileged role when it comes to subscription management. So you can see those roles actually, if you read any of these things, this tells you member of this group can create group, manage group settings. You can see these are not even talking about virtual machines, app service. No, these are related to Enter ID object. Now, for the outback roles, or what we call the subscription roles, you know, these are roles that we use use in managing resources, and you can see these kind of roles. This one grants you access to be able to manage all resources within your tenant. Contributor gives you everything the owner does. The only difference is, number one, you will not be able to assign role to any other person. That's one big difference between the contributor and the owner role. Some of these things also, you would not be able to create a custom role. There are a lot of them, but this guy and this guy are almost the same thing. The only difference, I just told you two of, what could be the differences between them. We have the global reader role here, which gives you access to be able to read users, groups, devices created within the tenant. If you want a user to be able to see all the subscription, all the resources, all the resource group within this particular tenant, you can now assign a reader role on the management group, on the resource, on the subscription also. This one will also give read access. The same way a global reader role will give you access, you know, to read anything within the Enter ID side. So you can see here, these ones are more tailored to, if you see all these roles, they are more tailored to, resources that we create within the environment. Do you want a virtual machine? Let's say job function roles. You will see those job function roles now. You'll see those job function roles are, let's say, API management service, virtual machine, Azure. Let me just type in storage account of virtual machines. You'll see. So you'll see something like virtual machine, um, contributor, virtual machine contributor, user login, uh, user login, data access, administrator, and the likes. So those are the ones related to resources. So that's the difference between the this and I think I wasn't sharing the whole screen. So people on, okay, so that's fine. So those are the differences. Let's just continue, and these are ways we create roles and the like. So um, those roles, both the ones on both the Azure enter ID roles and also the subscription roles, can be assigned to identities. What identities are we assigning them to? Users, groups, service principals, which are applications that we've created within the environment. And this just tells you about, the scope, which is where we are assigning the role on. If this one is role access, which are subscription roles or something, but the enter ID roles are tenant based. They are just assigned within a tenant and the like. Okay, so that should be for today. Any, I'm going to drop these also for people on LinkedIn and YouTube. If you want to go look at the, how to manage these. Let's see, AZ 104. Uh, so just look at those labs. Look at the labs. Um, Let me give me a minute, please. So look at the labs. Yeah. So these are all the labs. So we talked about the first one, which is the manage Microsoft Enter ID identities, manage subscription and outback. Now these are the two you should be looking at today: manage subscription and outback, manage governance via Azure policies. If you need any help, let me know. Um, and but most of those things are things we've actually done. I'm just going to drop it on LinkedIn also. And so if you want to copy that link also on, yeah, also on my YouTube channel, and I'm just going to drop it here also. So if you go in there, the same thing that I've actually explained, and this is just telling you, how to create a new resource group, how to now assign subscription to that resource group, and what are some of the tasks. I've got within my YouTube also, I've got like videos where I've actually explained this. So if you want to leverage on these also, it's fine. It's on my YouTube. You can see the playlist under Azure um, Administrator Labs. Those are just there. All right. Any question before I call it a day? The time has been fast spent. We're 8 minutes, ahead of our schedule. All right. If there are no other questions or there are no questions, I'll call it a day. Yeah.
Hello,
Yes, Sam.
sir.
I can't hear you.
Hello.
Yeah, I can hear you now.
Sorry, I have a question, and the question has to do with the last session that we did after. First of all, thanks for this session. The one we did after is the 900. So we use our students access them, but I discovered that I don't know what happened. The student access went off on my accounts, and it was showing that I have because I received a message a few days ago saying that my subscription will soon expire.
Are you sure this is just student account? Are you sure it's not the free trial? So if you have taken the free trial, which is the $200 $200, it's only going to last for a month, and after that, you need to either go to pay as you go or activate any other subscription type. But if you obtain the student one, which is the $100 per month, you are not going to be forced, or you are not going to be notified that it's expiring soon. I think that will only expire after a year, and they will need you to re-verify that you are still a student. So it's something we can look at together. You can just do a screenshot of it and send it to me. I will look at it. You know.
Okay, all right, thank you.
All right. Any other thing? If there is nothing, we just call it a day, and we talk next week. Thanks, everyone. Thanks for joining. Really appreciate it. Bye, everyone.
Thank you.